How's it going? So I'm told we're doing a YouTube live today in the shop. So welcome, I'm Vic Teslin, and welcome to my shop.
Let me check that everyone.
Can everybody hear me okay? Somebody give the big thumbs up in the comments. Everything okay?
Save, share. All good. Okay, we got an all good. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome to the shop. So the purpose of doing this was that I wanted to be able to show you how I got this set up, because I went from a larger shop to a smaller shop. And so this is basically a one-car garage with a little bit extra length. So it's about 26 feet by 11 feet across. So typically they're not this deep, but you get the idea. Anyway, you can get some pretty effective tools in here. Before I go too far, some of the stuff that's in here has been gifted by certain companies, and I'll try to remember to point those out. The understanding, of course, whenever I work with anybody, is that I don't take any money in order to say nice things about stuff. And I don't work with people whose stuff I don't like. So if you see it here, and I tell you that they gifted it to me, it's because we've talked and I probably emailed them and told them how much I love their stuff, and we've worked something out. But for the most part, there's nothing in here that some random company sent to me and I'm like being a spokesperson, okay? These are the things that I like to use. If you find that sort of thing triggering, then maybe this isn't the video for you, okay? So, first of all, and most importantly, is the bench area for me. So this is basically where, once all of the milling is done, once everything is ready to go, this is where I do the majority of my work. So one of the things that is important is storage. And I don't like things behind doors or behind in drawers and things like that, because I'm not that smart. And I forget what's back there or in there, and then it's gone forever until I move and find it again. But if you look over here, if anybody remembers the shop that we had in Burlington, I basically took the shelf that I had up against the window and I've cut it in half and maintained the same sort of storage. So I have the majority of marking and measuring stuff up here. It's a little bit cluttered. There's a lot of dividers because I have a bit of a problem when it comes to dividers. I like them, they're cool, and I buy them. As well, we've got all the sort of chisel stuff down here, and my hammers and mallets, of course, made by Old Soldier Tool Works. If you don't know who he is, you really need to check him out. And then, of course, some files and things like that down at the bottom. These are held in with magnets. As well, up here with some of the Japanese saws, again, they're just held in place with magnets because I didn't want to build a proper cabinet. So just so you know, Andrea's on the other side of the camera, which we're going to try to see if we can get her on the other side of the camera today. We'll see what happens. She ran away too quickly, so if she comes back...
Okay, I have questions as well. Do you want questions as they come in or at the end?
Well, let's do them a little bit of both.
Okay, tell me when you're ready for questions.
Give me a question.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can make sure I see them. Where did they go?
The questions have disappeared.
They disappeared. But it was about, where do you store jigs?
Oh, yeah. We've heard a lot of people talking about jigs. I'll get to jigs in a minute, because there isn't a whole pile of them here, but on the other side of the shop there are.
And then people want to hear about the workbench, UJK workbench.
Right, got it. And we'll talk specifically about that, because I know that's a going concern. So if we come over onto this side here as well, I also have my Western style saws. I've recently switched to the number 9, which is fantastic. It's a great joinery saw. It's much larger, and it allows me to do anything other than dovetails, which is fantastic. Rip and crosscut panel saws, really important, because sometimes the machines aren't big enough, and so we have a way to cut things cross-cut and then a smaller rip to be able to do some work at the bench. Then this is just an old recycled bookcase from IKEA. It's not glamorous, it's not beautiful, but it's been rejigged and refitted in order to work well with all my hand tools and all the things that I use all the time at the bench. This set of drawers here, Veritas used to sell these drawers. They were basically designed to fit into curves. They don't make them anymore, which is a real shame because they are a fantastic way to store things. And of course, I've got them all labeled because, like I said earlier, I don't know what's in there because they're hidden away. So there's a few more saws here on this side. And then, of course, the wall of clamps. I've been working with Bessie for a number of years now, and they've been kind enough to gift me some clamps. And of course, I accept because Bessie makes the best darn clamps on the planet. Again, not paid to say that, but if you're a woodworker and you've used a Bessie clamp, you know it's true. So anyway, everything up against the wall, and I like it nice and close to the bench because if I'm going to do something with them, I try to plan ahead, have all my clamps all laid out, ready to go, but sometimes you don't think of things, or things go awry, as they do in a glue up, and so everything is right here to be able to grab in case I have trouble. Questions?
There was a question about when we were sort of looking overall in that area.
Yeah.
It was just a question on what are your thoughts on shooting boards?
Yeah, shooting boards are fantastic. I've got a few of them. So there's one right here that I use all the time. I don't have a fancy shooting plane. I apologize. I just have a good old low angle jack. And then I also have a smaller one. This one's designed to use, I do cutting. I always cut and shoot on the same board because it seems ridiculous to have two boards. So they're usually chewed up pretty badly. This one's designed to use in conjunction with a smaller plane, obviously, for smaller work. And then this is for a little bit bigger. I put some slick tape on here to basically allow this to slide back and forth really easy. And yeah, they're nothing glamorous. None of my jigs are beautiful works of art made out of cabinet grade materials. They're literally jigs that I screw and nail together to get the job done. So,
okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about this bench. So, this was an experiment. This is an ongoing experiment. So we all know about traditional workbenches. We all know how they work. We all have read all of the books from Lost Art Press. I know I have. And so this is a departure from all of that. So this is basically an MFT, a multifunction table. Andrea's standing behind another multifunction table right there. If you just show, you can see that it's got the aluminum rails and all the other fancy gear. The MFT3 is what that was. But this is basically the same thing, except the folks at Axminster in the UK have this UJK branded bench. Now, they sent me this top and sides because I told them I wanted to experiment with using the functionality of an MFT, but doing handwork. And so I wanted to be able to plane on this, I wanted to be able to chisel on this, I wanted to be able to do layout work on this, and so because I understand, like, all of the functionality that you get, you know, being able to basically clamp anywhere you want, being able to put in stops, being able to use dogs, in this, it's very helpful, right? And so I thought, okay, well, how is this going to work, you know, as far as the top and sides and all that other stuff. There's no vise on here. The nice thing about this is that I can use those same clamps in the apron position, or I can, if you don't have one of those, you can use just a basic squeeze clamp to attach things to the front, and it's got a textured surface, so it's actually pretty grippy. The base is made with solid ash, but you can make this out of pretty much anything. I wanted to make it out of something dense and heavy so that it wouldn't move around anywhere, and it doesn't. I'm really pleasantly surprised that this hasn't moved at all as I've worked on it. So basically, because I've used the MFT and I've used Festool stuff, and I wanted to see if I could port over those work holding solutions to what is considered more traditional. And so there is nothing traditional about this. The bench tops are fantastic. They're made out of a different product. They're not MDF, they're HDF, and it has a HDF.
Valchromat?
Valchromat is the brand name of it, but it is made out of HDF, high density fiberboard, so it's a lot more rigid, a lot more dense, and it's going to last a heck of a lot longer. This one hasn't been treated yet. The one in behind Andrea here has been treated with a bit of wax and oil, and so you can see it's a little bit darker, but glue ups don't stick to it, which is fantastic. So yeah, so far so good. You know, I've noticed that I was worried about flex in the top. This particular apron system has gusseting in the inside that sort of prevents that from happening. And so that's a good thing. I always thought if I had to, I could bridge this with like a thicker sort of plating beam if I was really concerned about it. But so far it hasn't been an issue at all. So I don't know, it's a little bit outside of the box, but that's kind of what I do. So so it's worked really well.
Okay, before you move on,
Oh, there's more questions.
we had done a story and got people to ask questions. So I just want to see if there's anything people want to know about your tool storage.
Right. Well, I think we covered that.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's all right there out in the open so that I know where it is. I can just reach and grab.
How and where do you store your jigs?
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
And then is there anything about the bench? When will the company that makes the top for the bench have more available? We're not sure about
Yeah, you got
inventory.
Axminster and inventory. You know, inventory and tools these days is just ridiculous.
Definitely reach out to them.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Tool walls. What kind of stuff do you like to hang up, and how do you build the fixtures?
Well, I mean, really, I just look at the individual tool itself, and I make it specific for that tool. There are so many resources online and in workshop books that can show you different ways. One of my favorite ones is the one from Fine Woodworking that Christian Bexford did when he did his beautiful tool cabinet. He included a lot of information about making custom tool holders, which is fantastic. But again, like everything out and open, and sometimes that turns into a disaster, as you see here, where I've got like a bunch of stuff sort of smushed into this thing. I've got GoPros charging, I've got cords, and I've got little boxes that I've made for, you know, different things. And so this is a little bit of a disaster here. But for the most part, it's not bad. Talking about jigs, I usually leave the jigs nearby if I can, the machines that I work with them on. So for example, this is a drilling jig for drilling the relief holes when you're using a plane that has an adjuster in it. In this case here, it allows you to hold the bed at 45 degrees and then you can clamp it in place and then drill holes into it. That gets done at the drill press, and so that lives at the drill press as well. There's also a small jig here designed to use for sharpening router blades, like hand router blades. On Fine Woodworking, Ben Strano and I did a video on this, so you can check that out if you like. But yeah, I normally keep the jigs with the equipment that I'm working on, and then I find that that's a lot easier. Okay, so we have a second MFT here. This one's really designed for machining work. Routing, cross-cutting, ripping, all that other stuff. What you're probably already noticing is that there's no table saw in here. And that usually raises a lot of eyebrows, and that's good, because I like raising eyebrows. But this is my table saw. Track saw and an MFT surface with rails. Anything that people can do within reason anything that people can do with a table saw, I can do with a rail, a track saw, and a router. Any joinery, I can't cut coves. You know that lovely trick where you put fences on either side of a table saw blade and then push a piece of wood through sideways? Yeah, I can't do that. But you probably shouldn't anyway, because that's not really how the saw's supposed to work.
Okay.
Andrea said there's a question.
Oh no, I have a question.
Andrea has a question.
Well, you started off without a table saw.
Yeah.
When we lived in Burlington, you had a table saw.
Yep.
And then you got rid of it.
Yep.
So now you're all like, I don't have a table saw, but you've had one.
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
why or
Okay, yeah. So when we were in the shop in Burlington, you all know Black Walnut Studio, Steve Durgarabidian. He had replaced his table saw with a fancy saw stop, and so he had this really nice Delta Unisaw that he wasn't using anymore. And so he said, "Hey man, do you want it? Like maybe you can use it." And at that point, I hadn't had a table saw for a number of years, and so we brought it into the shop, and quite frankly, it turned into a surface to cut material with my track saw on. And so I wasn't using it. And so you've got this massive island in the middle of your shop that personally for me, I wasn't using. Now everybody's workflow is different. Some people cannot live without the table saw, and that's fine. We're not making any judgments on that. All we're saying is that you don't need it, right? Because you can work with a lot smaller tools that allow you to bring the tool to the work versus taking the work to the tool. And if you've ever broken down a sheet of plywood, putting it up onto a table saw is a real chore, and it's a little bit scary.
All right, there were two questions.
Question.
Do you have any plans for underneath the UJK bench? There's some stuff stored under there,
Yep.
but what's going on with it?
Yep, so I haven't figured out whether or not I'm going to utilize that space under there. Right now, there's a
Moxon vise?
there's a Moxon vise and a couple of things that I use from time to time. I'm playing with different designs for jigs to use at these benches that I'm not ready to talk about yet because they're only sort of half-baked, like a lot of my ideas. And so, but basically that's going to be used for storage. I also thought it would be nice to have a small vacuum under there so that I can vacuum up my workspace as I'm working. I don't like to work in filth. I know a lot of you do. You like to have stuff everywhere and it gets cluttered, and that just doesn't work well for me in my workflow. And I don't necessarily like blowing dust around. So a lot of times people will have an air compressor. That's something else that you don't see in here because all of my nailers are battery powered. And so I don't need air to drive the nails. But if you do have air, it's very easy to just blow off your bench, but then that's just blowing dust everywhere. I would rather suck it up with the vacuum. And so my my extractor for my Festool stuff lives basically in between the two benches where I would use a vacuum the most. And so this allows me to hit the drill press, it allows me to hit the two benches, and also allows me to do whatever work I need to do at some of the other stations, because of course it's portable, right? So
Okay. There was another question,
yeah,
which is very relevant.
yes.
Do you have any projects or builds on the go, or is teaching taking up most of your time?
Oh, don't even get me started.
I think that's a stay tuned.
So
Stay tuned, right?
yes, stay tuned.
It's more of a stay tuned.
Vic is going through a bit of an identity crisis, and I've spent so much time focused on teaching that I haven't had the chance to build anything. And so that is really driving me crazy.
You love teaching.
I love teaching. Don't get me wrong, but it takes up a ton of my time. And I love passing on what I know. I've been very fortunate to have studied under some incredible woodworkers, and I want to be able to pass that on, and will continue. But the not making furniture thing is really starting to get to me. And I had a meeting with a couple of friends, and they were very honest with me, and basically led to a bit of an identity crisis because nobody knows what Vic Teslin builds. And that's because Vic Teslin spends a lot of time teaching people how to build things, but isn't building anything himself. And so that's going to change. So I've already did some design work, and I'll be sharing that with you guys. We're gonna start building more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very good question. Thank you for bringing it up. I'll talk to my therapist about it later.
When would be a good time to talk about lighting? Where you put your lights? What type of lights?
Right. Well, let's talk about it right now that you've brought it up.
Yeah.
So these lights are pretty awesome. I got them at our local Home Depot. They aren't inexpensive, but what's cool about them is they're low profile. And so if you look up here, you can see the rails from our garage door. It comes very close to the ceiling because this is only about a 7 and a bit ceiling. So I needed a way to basically have these so that if the door opens, of course I'm not going to shear them off the ceiling, which is important. And so these ones came recommended to me by a friend. And the cool thing about them is that you can change the color temperature of them. So I've got them right now on basically like a daylight setting, but you can also change them to make them more amber, a combination of the two, and then just the daylight. I like the daylight because it's closest match to what's coming in from the windows in the garage door. So there's nothing worse than working in mixed colors of light. As well, if Andrea pans over to her left, she'll see that when I teach online, because some of my students are very far away, and so I need to be able to light things so that they can see them. This light, which is designed for photography and videography, is also sitting at around 5,000K. And in fact, this actually, it's a little bit overkill, but this actually makes a very good bench light because this thing lights things up like Christmas. And so, that's a pretty handy thing.
Do you want to quickly mention the garage door since you were just talking about it? We replaced it.
Yeah, so this garage door used to be just like the plain uninsulated door. And so this now is insulated. I think it's R12, which isn't like super high, but it's been doing well in here for the winter. And we added these window panels in here so that we can definitely get some light in here as I'm working.
And how do you heat the shop to keep the, like, it's all
Right.
insulated, so
Right.
what are you doing for heating?
So for heating, believe it or not, we've got a tiny little electric heater from Canadian Tire that is doing a fantastic job at keeping this nice and warm. So all the walls and the ceilings are insulated. The door is insulated. The seals are good on the doors. And so that thing really only has to run once in a while. I keep it at about 16 degrees Celsius in here, whatever the heck that is in old Fahrenheit. But I keep it around 16 in here, and then if I'm going to do a glue up, I'll bump it up a couple of degrees. But I don't mind putting on a sweatshirt and coming in here and working. I find that that's more comfortable for me anyway. Andrea would die out here if she didn't have her mucklucks and her coat and all the other stuff on. So it's a bit cool.
Is lighting placement a factor? How did you decide on the layout?
So the layout of the lights is not really critical in my point of view because these lights are really designed to stop me from walking into stuff. And so basically this is just overall light, okay? If I need bright specific light, then I will use a task light. And my videography light works perfectly for that. But in my other shop, I also had a whole bunch of articulating lamps. Now, the nice thing about having low ceilings is that things are brighter here. So if you saw this before, when we first started, there was a light here, and then a light right there. And when you turn them on, it was like a dungeon in here. It was awful. But then once we put all of these lights in, it really brightened things up and made it easier.
Painting the floor and painting the walls really warmed it up.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the walls are painted with basically like a builder's beige kind of color. I wanted it a little bit warmer than just plain white. And then we went with gray. Andrea painted these floors. She did a fantastic job. She cleaned, she scrubbed, and then she painted. It was amazing.
Holding up well.
Yeah, it's doing really well. This isn't a super duper epoxy 2-part product that is going to knock you on your rear end. This is just a epoxy based 1-part paint, and it's working well. I've moved these big machines.
I mean, there's a couple little things here and there, but
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make our way around the shop.
Okay, so my sharpening station, no secrets. I use the Tormek. I love the Tormek. I bought the Tormek. They gave me a bit of a deal on the price, but I love the Tormek. And in here are all of my jigs and fixturing for it, so that I can sharpen whatever it is that I need to sharpen. The stand that's on it is interesting. It's a IKEA mobile kitchen island, and basically I added plywood to the sides, right? Same with this one here. I skinned it on the outside and then put doors on them, and then in this case here I put a bank of drawers in, and that works really well. When I bought these were like $65, and so I have my friend Linda Manzer to thank for that. She, if you don't know who Linda Manzer is, Google it, because, and if you're into guitars, prepare to have your mind blown. But she uses these things on all of her little workstations that she uses for building guitars, and she was like, it's so much easier than building stuff. And to be fair, this is solid birch. You can't get the wood for cheaper, right? So we've got the sharpening. This gets used all the time in the shop, this blackboard, right? A friend of mine got this for me because I still like chalk. I hate whiteboards because whiteboards are white for 3 seconds and then they're not white anymore. And that drives me crazy. They always look dirty. So, but for some reason I can tolerate chalkboards. So a lot of times if I'm trying to figure out a problem, I'll just draw it out onto this board here and kind of figure it out. If I've got measurements, I'll write them down on the board so that I can just look over from wherever I am in the shop and be able to do that sort of thing. So having something like this is fantastic. It's also magnetic. So if I have a set of drawings that I've created somehow, either with my old school drafting table and drafting equipment, or if I've used the iPad, I can attach it to this. So there's artwork all over the shop because I really feel like your space should be comfortable and welcoming, and it should include things that you enjoy. And so if you know, you know. Again, jigs and fixtures. Here's a big stack of my jigs and fixtures that I use at my bandsaw. This is for cutting bow ties. This is for cutting 4-degree wedges. This is for cutting more, probably closer to 7-degree wedges of 3/4 of an inch. And then this one is for cutting the wedges for my for the wooden planes that I make. And so this allows me to do, so you can see here, this is my fancy collection of jigs, and they basically get stacked up and they get put over here. Again, nothing fancy, just scraps of wood that I nailed together. I would love to say that I put a lot of thought and effort into them, but really the jig or the fixture just basically needs to hold my work at a certain angle or a certain place to allow the machine to do the work. I don't make them beautiful and sexy. I'm sorry, that's as good as it gets. Okay.
We've got some lumber storage there. Someone was asking, where do you store all your lots and lots of...
So I store my lumber out here, and in our backyard is a massive shed, and that's where it's stored. Unfortunately, I don't have a better option for here, so that's what we do.
We have some in here.
Yeah, we have some in here because when I bring stuff in from out there, I gotta let it rest for a while because of course it's not climate controlled and all that other stuff. But I've got a bunch of ash in here and some other stuff that I've been working with lately. And of course it stacks up behind the combo machine really nicely. we're not making a political statement here. Andrea just happens to be Ukrainian, and so her family is from the Ukraine, and so that's why that's there.
I
We're
got
not
that
making a
from
statement.
the like, what is it? The Toronto Ukrainian Festival on Bloor.
Right. So
Right.
there you go.
Question
Ukraine.
about why our grass is all white outside.
Well, it was all green up until yesterday, and then we got a dump of snow last night, and so we that's why our grass is white. Where are you from?
That was Peter.
Oh, Peter from
BC.
From BC, yes. We know. He said Peter was sending pictures in our group of flowers blooming.
Yes.
And it's like, come on, Peter. Okay, so air cleaner. I typically don't think that these are useful, but they do. If you leave them on after you've done something particularly dusty, it does clear the room up quicker than if you just let it settle. My friend Rachel upgraded hers in her shop, and so she very kindly gifted this one to me. And it's a Grizzly because she's American, and so she gets all of her stuff down there. So this is a Grizzly machine. It works really well. It's fairly quiet, and normally you mount it to the ceiling, but if I did that, I would knock myself out on the corners every time. So I basically stood it up, and it's working just fine. So. Okay, now we're in the machine area. Okay.
The machine room.
The machine room. Again, no table saw. And
There was questions, so let me get my phone.
There's questions?
About machines. So start talking and talk about your dust collector or something. And
so I've got King equipment in here because I've upgraded recently. And in all fairness, King extended me a discount on the equipment so that it made it a little easier for me to get. But for the most part, again, if I didn't like the tools, I would not be using them, especially things like thickness planers and bandsaws, because they're critical to how I work.
so you replaced the Rikon jointer planer.
Yeah, because I wanted more capacity.
How does this new one compare, or can you just sort of talk about why you replaced it and
so
what you like?
The reason I replaced it is because this one is much larger. This is a 12-inch capacity, okay? And so that's nice. The other thing that I like about this is that on the one that I had, you had to remove the outfeed table in order to do the conversion. But when you do this one, you just have to unlock the two locks and then lift this up. And then this side here just flips over, and now it's in planing mode. And so I really like that because it's much quicker. We also have, so this is a beefier machine than the one that I had before. This one has a lever to engage and disengage the feed rollers. Plus, if you look in here on the wheel, there's a counter on there, and that basically measures in millimeters to 1 decimal point. So if I set this, like here the other day, it says, or 152.7, I can literally put something through that, measure it, and it's that measurement. And for me, that's really helpful. Especially when I'm resawing something at the bandsaw, and I've resawn it oversized, and then need to plane it down. If I resaw it at 16 millimeters, but I know I need 15, I can literally just dial that in, and in one pass it's gone. So this thing is, this is a lot beefier. You can see here in all the guts here, we've got a helical segmented head, and so we've got all of our feed rollers, our anti-kickback pawls. You know, it really is pretty awesome. Pressure rollers, the whole 9 yards. So this is just a little beefier of a machine. That's not rust, that's Cocobolo. We were working on planes in here with a student, and we were doing some trimming. So this thing's fantastic. It has a safety catch here, and it's not heavy, it's not hard to lift, and then lock it into place and you're ready to go again. So for me, this was just an upgrade. I wanted to upgrade my tools to something a little bit more industrial. And so that's what this machine allows me to do. And a combination machine in a small shop is banging because now you have one footprint and it's on a heavy duty stand so that I can move it out. And if I need more in feed and out feed, but I mean, everybody always talks about 8 feet like it's some golden number that you need to be able to attain, but really, how often do you do 8 feet length of lumber? Not very often. If you are, if you're planing and thicknessing and then cross-cutting, you're probably losing a lot of wood because of that. It's much better to cross-cut to a rough dimension and then put it through this machine.
Okay.
Good? Okay.
There have been a couple, yay, we love the flag. I wondered if you wanted to speak to why you have that flag.
I have that flag because people are idiots. And
let's try that again.
I have that flag because some people think that it's okay to treat people differently because of who they love or what they choose to do. I do not. Everybody here is welcome. I don't care if you are married to a goat. As long as you're a good person, come in here. Come and learn woodworking. That's why that's there, right? Because that needs to signal to people that don't come in here if you're going to be an idiot. And sometimes people have come in here and given that a sideward glance but never said anything because that would have been the end of that relationship. But that's why that's there.
Inclusive space,
Absolutely.
welcoming space.
Absolutely.
We don't judge.
We don't
just
care.
Be who you are and woodwork.
Yeah, and if you're a little weird, that's even better. Okay, so over here we've got this. So this is where we pulled in the power. We were able to come up through the attic of the house, which was fantastic, and then come down with that big cable, and then we put a 100 amp panel in here. We don't have 100 amps in here, but it's got the room for it.
We hired an electrician.
Oh yeah, hired an electrician. Vic doesn't do electricity. That's silly because it never goes well. Believe it or not, this picture was being thrown away from the last owners. I'm like, who throws away that? So there it is. I've got a remote control for my dust collector. So basically, the dust collector is plugged into this, and then I can control it. So wherever I bring the hose, I either have it attached to this machine or I have it to the bandsaw. It doesn't go, I don't use it for anything else other than that. And speaking of which, the dust collector is a cam vac from Record Power. This is sort of a different way of handling dust collection. This is essentially, I believe, a 2.5 horsepower unit with 2 motors in it. And this thing really exhausts chips. Pretty fantastic. It's compact and small. This one's designed to mount to the wall, which again, if I can get something off of the floor here, that's perfect because now I'm not tripping over it, right? If you have a bigger shop, they make kind of roller versions of this that you can move around, but it's pretty small. It's got an incredible capacity when you think about it for such a small unit. And I upgraded the filters in here to the pleated filters so that we get a heck of a lot better filtration.
If anyone hasn't seen on Instagram,
Yeah.
Ethan was here and he describes the filters and the whole thing in amazing detail.
Yeah, so I got this from
Ethan at Stockroom Supply.
Ethan at Stockroom Supply.
This is why I'm here, folks.
Now just flew right out of my head. I'm sorry, Ethan. Stockroom Supply in Wainfleet, Ontario. They distribute these in Canada. And if you have any questions about dust collection, ask Ethan. And if you know, ask Ethan is a thing. And he'll talk to you about what unit makes sense for you. And of course, because they're a lovely family owned and operated business, they're not interested in upselling you. They're interested in getting you what you need because your happiness is their happiness. Okay.
Okay, what tool's shoved in the back corner there and why?
Okay, so in the back corner is something that doesn't get used a whole lot, but man, oh man, when you need it, it is fantastic. So this is the Supermax thickness sander. This thing is perfect when I'm working with thinner pieces, edge bandings or inlays or things like that. This allows me to size the material to a reasonable size without having to worry about putting thin pieces of wood into the thickness planer, which often gets very exciting as it gets sucked up into the blades. It has a Wixie gauge on it, and it has, like, I've used a lot of different thickness sanders, but this is by far the best one that I've used. I bought it with my own monies, and I don't get paid to say nice things about it. This thing is awesome. I've used all kinds of the lesser expensive ones, and things like changing the paper are so much easier. Things like making adjustments. It's got quick adjustments on it. It's fantastic. So it's in the corner because it doesn't get used very often. But when it does get used, it gets pulled out into the middle here, attached to dust collection, and away we go.
And there was a dust collection question.
Mm-hmm.
Can the CamVac pull dust from a dual port machine, like a 1.5 inch plus 1/4 inch ports? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it can, for sure. You can, yeah, like, I don't know what type of machine we're talking about, probably a bandsaw maybe, or maybe a table saw. A lot of times they have a dual if you have overhead. So I'm assuming that's what they're talking about. But yeah, yeah.
All right. I think that's it for now.
Okay. A unique feature in this shop is the milk delivery door. So this garage used to be a carport, and back in the day they used to deliver milk, and so it opens from the outside, and then there's a door on the inside. And so a lot of times Andrea will knock on this door to remind me that it's time for dinner, or she'll pass a snack through or something like that. So it's kind of like an intercom system, but like going right through the wall. Okay, chop saw. This is the Bosch slider. If you've ever used one of these, they're fantastic. I don't have like it in a big honking table or anything because, quite frankly, I can't afford the space for that in this shop. But I can definitely cut smaller pieces. Oftentimes, if I can't cut it, if I can't fit it under the track of my rail saw, I'll come and cut it over here. Now, I know that typically we don't like to cut small things on this, but if you're smart about it, you know, you can very easily use, you know, if you're cutting here, you can very easily put a piece on here and put downward pressure on it, and then that keeps your hands away from the blade but still holds the work in place. They sell all kinds of fancy jigs for that, but I try not to get my hands, you know, closer than here, because then I start to get that funny feeling in my bathing suit area, and that's usually an indicator that you're about to do something that's not safe. Okay, people who don't have that feeling are usually sponsored by Red Bull. So this thing works really well. The dust collection is awful, like every chop saw. Okay, but I've got a Rockler hose, and then I've got their multi-port situation here that plugs right in. Andrea, if you go to the other side, I think they'll see it.
I'm not sure, but...
So the nice thing here is that this can rotate.
Oh, I see.
And then you can plug it in, and then that is going to give us moderate dust collection. I have it hooked up to a remote so that the vacuum, I turn it on and off with this remote. Not that it's hard to reach for the vacuum, but the vacuum wasn't always there. I bought this at Walmart probably 10 years ago. It would cost $20, and it works like a charm. Okay. Okay. Then we've got this set of cabinets. Let me move this out of the way. So this is just where I store all of my things like screws and nails and jigs and hardware fixture, all the stuff that, you know, kind of gets used for building stuff. Some of it's just junk, which I just haven't had the heart to throw away yet. But on top of it lives my router tables. And so I don't have the room nor the desire to have a big honking router table taking up space. So I converted a Lee Valley drill press table into a router table by just I routed a GSM lift into the top. And then of course you can see I've got a 3 1/4 horse Bosch in there that allows me to really hog off material if I need to.
Steve.
What?
Steve was here.
What?
Blue tape.
Blue tape Steve was here. Ha! Steven. Okay, and then on top, a smaller version that houses a 1/4-inch rotor, like a palm rotor or a portable rotor, whatever you want to call it. And it has a fence and all that other stuff. The only thing this doesn't come with is dust collection port, which I don't understand why, but I have to mock something up in order to make it work. But this here, I can take this one, or I can take this one, I can take it over to the MFT, lock it down onto the MFT table, and then now I'm working safely and away we go. And if you've not used one of these before, I recommend this to all of my students. It's a pneumatic air switch that basically allows you to plug your router into this bit, and then this goes into the wall, and then this goes on the floor. And if you listen, when you step on the bulb, it's a switch, it turns on and off. So it allows you, especially if you're doing stopped cuts, to have like the ability to stop your cut and leave your hands holding the work, which is important, and then just stamp with your foot and you can turn it off. So those things are worth their weight in gold.
All right.
Okay.
Bandsaw.
Bandsaw. So this is the beefiest 14-inch bandsaw I've had, and again, I didn't get much more capacity than my other one, but what it did give me was a lot more robust of a machine. The steel that this is made of is the gauge is much thicker. It doesn't vibrate as much. It has a fence that has bearings on it, which allow it to roll nice and smoothly and then lock into place. The only complaint I have is the indice on here, because it's done with like a rounded piece of plastic. I find it's hard to read the numbers, but I'll fix that. I like that the height adjuster on the guides is super quick, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of time playing with that. And one of my favorite features of this saw is the fact that the tensioning is done with a hydraulic gauge instead of a spring. And so you can kind of follow the guidelines here, and when you set it, it's set and it stays set. And so I really like that. The quick release is very quick, just like that. You can see I took the tension off on the gauge there, and then when I tension it back up, it goes right back to where it was. So I don't often take the tension off because I'm using it fairly often. And of course, this saw also has a dual exhaust on it as well.
Hold on. I want you to talk about the dust collection for the bandsaw and what you do.
Oh, well, all I do is I just take the hose.
Your recent Rockler purchase?
Yeah, so this is a nice collapsible hose, and I just plug it in. I don't use the bottom one because I don't find it really does a whole heck of a lot. And so then I'm splitting the CFM for no reason. So I have it just up here, and it exhausts this machine really well. So you don't necessarily need both. Yeah, this handle's nice because I can also control the suction here by opening up this port. So far this has worked really well. They've really done a lot of thought when it comes to dust collection parts and components, and so and they're just across the road in Buffalo there, so I can stop in, or when I go down to Moody Meeks and visit, there's two within a half hour, so it's pretty cool. Okay, so then we have rigid foam. If you own a track saw, you probably know what this is for. This allows me, I put this down on this table, and then if I'm doing any kind of funny cut where I'm not cutting at 90 degrees or not cutting, well, 90 degrees basically is the issue, then I literally just set my saw for a millimeter deeper than I need, and then this is basically like a spoil board. And so I have two pieces so that I can do 8 feet if I have to, never had it happen yet, so I'm just using up this one first until I use up this one. Spare tracks. This is something that I bought recently, which I really like. The Stealth Mounts track that allows you to basically register your track at 90 degrees. I mean, it's a very simple product. It's not as fancy as the big aluminum expensive ones, but man, it works. It cuts 90 degrees. So what else do you want? You can spend all that money if you like, but I personally think that this is the way to go. I've got this length of track, which is perfect for this sort of operation. And then I got two tracks here that I can put together. These are both meter 400, and then I can put two of them together and get a nice long rip if I have to. I've all but removed the Festool OEM head that's all parked down underneath there because I don't use it anymore, because using this fence and using a pair of dogs with some rail clips really does a fantastic job. It's easy to remove. I can also set stops so that I can make repeatable cuts and those sorts of things. And it makes my life a lot easier. And again, like these products that are coming out of the UK from UJK is pretty incredible. So I'm pretty happy with them. Again, storage, right? A whole pile of router bits that I've had for 100 years that I don't use on the daily, but they're here, and some of them even still have the goop on them. So, you know, I don't know why they're here, but they're here. And then generally the ones that I use most often, I've spent a little bit more money and bought Whiteside. I buy all my Whiteside bits from KJP Select in Ottawa. They are a great Whiteside dealer and they really know what they're doing there. So, and then my 1/4 inch shanks, the ones that I use the most often, are all in here. And again, the ones that I use often are Whiteside, and then the ones that get used occasionally are Lee Valley or Freud. All right, extra plug-it cable here, but basically I just use the one cable all the time. I pick, because one of them, the heavier duty one of the two, will fit in all tools, whereas the lighter duty one won't. This basically is always connected to my vacuum or extractor, pardon me, Festool. And then that allows me to just basically have one cord out. The rest of them live in their sustainers, and you know, if I'm going somewhere with them, it's nice to have them. But in the shop environment here, this is all kind of static. My friend Scott came and helped me out.
Scott is watching.
Scott's watching?
He's here. Naughty Pine Woodworking.
Naughty Pine Woodworking on the gram. Scott is a cabinet maker, and he is much better at putting plywood together than I am. So he came and helped me. It was a course with the Domino, and we built this based on the design that Festool had put out for building this mobile cart. I didn't put in all the fancy drawers and stuff because those drawers are expensive. And basically I just put my MFT on top of it, and now I can work with it. It's on 6 casters, so I can unlock them and I can move this thing wherever I want. If it's a nice day out, I can go outside with it and work outdoors. So it's very handy. This was this area here was was originally designed for the VACSys, which is the vacuum system for Festool, but I don't have that. But it's a perfect place to lay your saw as you're working in between cuts and things like that. So I've got like all of the sort of clamps and things that I use often, and a nice big square with a couple of square stops on it that allows me to draw lines if I have to.
All right, so we'll just make our way to the drill press.
Yeah.
And is that the last stop?
That's the last stop. The drill press, variable speed. I like variable speed because I hate changing belts. And if I have to change belts all the time, then I don't. And then I end up running bits at incorrect speeds, and then we get burning problems and all that other stuff. It's got like a fairly useless light on here and a laser that works actually fairly well, impressively enough. And so I'm pretty happy with that. Not a lot to it. I like having a benchtop one because it means that I can put it on a cabinet and then put all of my drill bits and drilling paraphernalia in the underneath it, and away you go. So I find that that's very helpful. And then again, this is the Lee Valley drill press table, and it works really well. The best thing about it is the way it connects. There's a sub base on it that connects to the actual table, which makes it so much easier to install. And then the top bolts on with some Chicago bolts, and away you go. So, and then that's about it. I have a little cabinet here with all of my masking tape that I use. My bottle of shellac that is just sitting there because it gets used often enough. And that's about it. We're back where we started.
Nice.
Question.
I'll go through the chat. Anyone can write some questions, and if they have, I'll get to the Instagram ones first. So we've talked about lumber. Any tips on being more efficient in the shop?
Yeah, think about what you're doing. I've always found that the best way to work efficiently in the shop is, number one, have a shop that is laid out efficiently so that you're not, in some cases we have to move things out or back in or whatever in order to work. But I find that if you sort of create these discrete work areas, it makes it much easier to go to them and do the work. As far as like actually doing the work, I find that doing an order of operations, which is basically just a list where you build the project in your mind first, or if you have a set of instructions that you're working from, just kind of mark all those down and then basically tackle them one at a time. If your time is short in the shop, then maybe you only get one thing checked off the list. But the nice thing about having the list is you walk in here, you're ready to go, you know exactly what the next step is, and you go do it. If you don't have that, you spend a lot of time head scratching and trying to figure out what it is you're trying to do. Now, if your shop is a space where you come in specifically to scratch your head, then do that, right? But if generating a product or a project and getting it done is your goal, then have a list and just check it off. You can have it on a chalkboard, you can have it on an iPad, you can have it on a piece of paper, old school. And you can just check things off as you go.
Okay. While you're at the bench,
Yes.
let me pull this chat up again. Here we go. Do you have any guess about the weight of the workbench, the UJK?
Oh, geez. I don't know.
Let me see where the...
I don't know. I'm going to say it's like 100 pounds or so. All in. Yeah. But I mean, when I hand plane on this doesn't move anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, any guesses about the weight of the bench? Okay, so not really. We're not sure between the top. I'm sure UJ...
Heavy enough.
Yeah.
Let's say that. Because it really doesn't go anywhere. And in fact, I find it's more stable than my plywood Nicholson style bench was.
And so someone just asked, where is your plywood workbench?
It's down in our basement right now.
It sure is.
Yep. And so it's basically in storage right now because I'm doing this experiment on whether or not this is a viable option going forward. And so far, there's nothing about this that has made me not want to use it on the daily.
Okay. Miter Station. Would love for you to cover that. This person's on the fence about getting one because of space.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, like if you want a miter saw, like then get one. I mean, the good ones, right? Like the I would say the two best ones in my opinion uh, is the Bosch #1, and #2 would be the Festool. Both of those are fantastic saws that I'm comfortable cutting furniture grade cuts on. So, you know, where you're doing that sort of not just a rough cut, but where you're actually dimensioning pieces or making cuts to final length. That saw does an incredible job at holding tolerances. So, yeah, if you don't have a ton of space, you don't really need a ton of space. You can literally put one on a folding bench and or like a Portamate or you know those types of things, and you can use them.
All right. How's the noise for the dust collector? You did do some Instagram videos and even the comparison with like the one hose versus two.
Yep, yep. So this machine is fairly quiet. I mean, I can't. It's gonna be. I can turn it on, but on a video, it's hard to kind of gauge how loud it is. But you've got these two black hoses on here that basically take the exhaust from here, and they're channeled over to the corner, which you can see they're just kind of hanging out there. And basically, then all of the exhaust noise is coming out over here. Now, something that I've been toying with is taking these hoses and putting them up through the ceiling because there's a little bit of a storage area up here. You can see the trap door go up into there, and then the exhaust sounds would be in another room essentially. And so that can be very helpful. And so, but I mean, as far as noise goes, it's the quietest dust collector I've ever had.
I'm thinking about this shop compared to Burlington. Literally on the other side of this wall is our family room. And when you're working,
Yeah.
I hardly hear you.
Mm-hmm.
So like even the noise of everything when you have dust collection on and a tool like a machine, I wouldn't say it's disruptive to like just the surroundings.
Yeah, yeah. So it's fairly quiet. It's still louder than all of the other machines, right? Because most dust collectors are. But for the most part, it's not bad. They have the numbers on the website that tell you exactly, and then there's arguments about you know how accurate those numbers are or whatever. We had decibel readings in here. I can't remember what the numbers were. We also had wind speed tester to be able to test the suction and all that other stuff, and then like it works as advertised, which is good as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Finishing. When it comes to finishing in the shop, do you have any plans of doing that, or how do you do that?
Finishing?
It says, do you have any plan of doing finishing in the shop?
Yeah, I always do. I always finish in the shop.
So it's mostly hand applied finishes,
Yeah,
right?
hand applied finishes for the most part. So the two products that I've been using a lot lately have been Rubio Monocoat, and then the other one is the True Oil by, the name is escaping me.
We always have walrus oil on hand.
Yeah, we always have walrus oil too, yeah, because I mean, like their furniture butter, like it lives right here because like whenever I build a plane, whenever I build anything, a lot of times, you know, if it's not going to take a ton of wear, the walrus oil stuff goes on there really well. And it cures well, and it's got a nice wax coating on it so that it, you know, protects and stuff. That's what's on that bench, and that will be what's on this bench. That was a test to see how it held up. It's holding up great, so I'm going to do this one. But yeah, finishing, I usually start with shellac because it's sort of the universal sealer, and then I will put on a coat or two of whatever else. I don't get too nutty about the finish because you can really sort of like, you can really go off the deep end with the finish. This shop is not set up for spraying. I have spray equipment. I have sprayed. But this shop is just not set up for that sort of thing. I would basically have to mask everything off in order to be able to do that. And for a lot of, because I've been teaching so much lately, for doing small boxes, projects, things like that, it's not an efficient way to, because you got to do the setup and the tear down and the cleanup and all that other stuff. So if you're building, regular sized furniture on the norm, then yeah, looking at a spray system is a great idea. And David Bedrosian, who's on Instagram, a friend of ours, he has a little portable setup that he's made in his garage that allows him to spray things really efficiently. Same with Marty Schlosser. He has a nice spray setup. He does a lot of education work for Fuji Spray, which are fantastic sprayers. And he's got a jammy setup in his shop. That is pretty cool. So if you're interested in that, go and see those guys. But for the most part, I'm using some form of oil wax, hard wax oil, and shellac.
Okay. What's the height of the UJK bench?
It's about this tall.
So it's customizable, right? Like, because you build the
you can
base.
make the legs however you want. Ideally, you want to be kind of at your wrist joint.
Your coffee cup is right in the way.
Right in the way. Yeah, you want up to your wrist joint when you're doing sort of hand work. So for me,
You're 6'1".
yeah, I'm 6'1", and the bench top is sitting at 880 mils, which for those of you still working with the King's foot, that is 34.5 inches. So that's my, and of course the real estate is the same as any MFT. So you're looking at 1100 mil, or roughly 43.25 by 718 or 28.25. So it's a little bit more of a sort of, it's more square than most workbenches are. But I found that to be quite helpful actually, because I can push things over, work on this side and work on this side. Because there's no vices that I have to worry about, I don't have to worry about being right here at my vise. I can work wherever I want to work. So yeah.
Okay, just a few more questions.
Yep, and then we gotta go because we have things to do.
We got things to do and places to be. Radial arm saw versus miter saw, which one?
So radial arm saw is a great saw. You have to be careful with them because you have to put the proper blade on them because they can be dangerous. They can climb cut and basically come at you at a high rate of speed. So that being said, you can do an awful lot of cool things with a radial arm saw. You can cross cut to very specific dimensions. You can do angled work. Some people even tilt the blade to use it in a ripping capacity. So yeah, there's really some cool stuff that you can do with a radial arm saw. You can also, some of them are designed to put a dado stack on, which, I don't know, I've done it before and it's like it's pretty wild when you are removing that much material with a radial arm saw. You definitely need the space for it. And a lot of people tend to have the radial arm saw and then building out from either side. Jack English Tools out in Jack Forsberg up in the Ottawa area.
Yeah.
He uses a vintage Delta one that he's rebuilt, and he does all kinds of cool things. So if you don't know about him, go check him out on Instagram because he does some pretty wild joinery with it and precision joinery with it. So
And TikTok. He's done a lot of TikTok videos.
He's on the TikTokers.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't dance though, so don't go looking for him if you're hoping for someone to be lip syncing and dancing.
We're gonna take a slight twist.
A twist.
A turn. Haha. Because someone asked about wood turning.
Yeah.
First of all, who's your favorite wood turner? This was asked by
my favorite wood turner would have to be Pat Laperriere in Quebec, also a star of a Netflix special on making things,
Making fun.
making fun.
But good old Pat Lap.
Yeah, and in fact, there's Pat's work is in here because he makes little things, and he made this for me. And so it sits right here, and every time I see it, it reminds me of my buddy Pat.
We've got bowls in the house,
We have
a
bowls
pepper
in the house,
mill.
pepper mill. We've got all kinds of things that Pat's done.
So just
yes, he's my favorite turner.
And this might be a better question for him. Wood turning, carbide or traditional HSS tools?
So if I have to turn something, and there's no lathe in here right now, the lathe is in storage because I don't use it very
It's
often.
with the plywood bench in the
The
basement.
plywood bench in the basement. So you are going to get a way better result if you're using traditional tools because they're sharp and they're cutting as opposed to scraping. Sometimes in the past when I've had to just make something quick, a handle, a foot, a something, I will just take the carbide tools and go at it. The favorite turner of mine who we've mentioned has been threatening to teach me how to turn for a number of years now, but we just haven't been able to make it happen. So I would love for Pat to teach me how to turn because I would love to be able to use traditional tools and get the finishes that he's getting. Like my vote is if you want to learn turning and be good at it, I would go to traditional tools. The carbide tools will work. You'll be doing more sanding. There's more dust in the air, and they're not as versatile. That's a non-turner's opinion of turning tools.
Yep. I think we have answered all the questions from Instagram stories.
Excellent.
And I think on the chat, if I missed, I'm sorry, but I'm going through the chat.
If she missed your question, you can send her a strongly worded email.
Send me an email.
At learn@victeslandwoodworks.com, and she will
I will apologize and
profusely and will beat herself up for days. Listen, folks, if you've stuck around to the end of this, you either have absolutely nothing going on today or you're nursing a hangover. Thank you for hanging out with us. I think I'm going to do this a little bit more often, especially when I'm doing things because as we discussed earlier, Vic needs to be in here talking in the third person.
The woodworker needs to woodwork.
And so we're going to do that more. So if you have questions, you can always get to us on Instagram or you can send us a message. If you're interested in doing any education stuff with us, private is what we're really focusing on right now. We're doing a lot of private students, both in person and online, or mentorship. Mentorship basically is we get together at a certain frequency and we bounce ideas off of each other, and I help you come up with solutions to problems and those sorts of things. So if you're interested in any of that, you can head to our website, victeslandwoodworking.com. No. Is that what it is?
VicTeslandWoodworks.com.
VicTeslandWoodworks.com.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's our business.
Right. And so, and then the lovely lady behind the camera who, let's get
don't
her
do
on the
it.
camera for a
Don't do
second.
it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
So, so this lovely lady will be answering all of your emails. She takes care of everything. She's always branded up. You can see, yeah, she's always branded up. And so she will take care of your questions. She'll pass you on to me and make sure that things actually happen as opposed to if I'm in charge of scheduling where things go horribly wrong. So I would be lost without you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, I hope you enjoyed it. If you do have any questions, you can leave a comment because this video will be on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll post it. Lots of thanks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and support and interest. And
Yes.
we're just going to keep on doing
I'm
what we're
gonna build
doing.
stuff.
Yes.
You
Awesome.
heard it here.
Thanks.
Bye, folks.